And now my screen is tiny. Teeny, tiny, tiny. But that worked, right? Yes. Yes. All right. So I'm really excited to be here today. This is the third time I've been to this event. It's an amazing event. Thank you, Matt, for having me back. Thank you to Manchester Digital. I'm really excited to share the ideas that I have with you today. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you about process or templates or anything like that. We're talking bigger picture stuff. I'm really into the community, and yes, I am showing a picture of myself on screen. I'm a consultant. I left my job a year ago. I was working for an agency called Happy Cog, and I decided to go out on my own. So I'm working with companies, product companies, agencies, and helping them to fix their process. I've been coaching PMs, helping them to be better PMs, doing that kind of stuff. Also have started Pathfinder DPM with Sam Barnes. We're rolling that out this year. Co-founded Everyday DPM, which is a daily blog, last year, and Matt and Holly, both from the UK, just joined the team. They're going to be contributing as well, so keep an eye on that. And like Matt mentioned, I founded the Digital PM Summit, which is kind of the first, or pretty much the first event for Digital PMs. So excited to be here. As you can tell, my professional world is all about Digital PM. And I'm going to talk about how I got into that. I'm also going to ask you for a little bit of feedback. This isn't going to be your standard keynote. I'm going to ask for some participation. And we're going to do a little tiny exercise at the end. So to start off, I have questions. I think this is kind of part of who I am. I have questions about why I have the job I have, how I landed there, what does it mean? What does the role mean for the companies that we work for? But I also have some questions for you. I want to know who came into their career straight out of university as a DPM or is currently a student. Please raise your hand. A few people. Okay. Hands up. Students are up there. I know you guys. Great. I want to know who holds the title Digital Project Manager currently? Or, okay, wow, a lot of you for Digital Project Manager. That's cool. Seems kind of new. How about something similar, like producer, or just project manager within an agency? Okay. Without the digital, yeah, okay. How about for more than 5 years? Digital PM, more than 5 years. Yeah, we're still kind of young. Who would consider themselves an accidental project manager? Meaning, you just kind of fell into this, it found you? I'm there with you. I'm right there with you. And that's not a bad thing. What I want to say is, you're not an accident. Okay? No matter what your mom and dad say. No, seriously, though. I do believe that we, as PMs, especially in this industry, fell into this role intentionally in some way. By the grace of God, we fell into these jobs and these projects because our teams needed us. And I want you to keep that in mind. So I wanted to kind of tell a story of myself and kind of how I came into this, because I think you'll all be able to relate to that. So I'm going to roll through these kind of embarrassing slides, so bear with me. So as a little boy, I wanted to be a doctor at a very, very young age. I have no idea why. My parents can't remember why. It's just I always wanted to be a doctor, a pediatrician specifically. So thinking back, I think, like, what made me want to be a doctor? What were the things that I loved? As a kid, I loved art. Always have loved art. Drawing, painting, sculpting was always my thing. Loved playing. Every kid loves playing. But my way of playing was weird. I was the kid that would play with Matchbox cars and line them up in very straight lines. Upstairs, I was just lining up the coffee cups. It's like a weird thing about me. So I've always had this like kind of organizational brain. It's a good picture. Age 13, looking really cool. Still wanted to be a doctor. That didn't change. Still way into art, into reading and writing. Those are things that I kind of grew into. But I would kind of hung on to the organizational thing, right? Like, I would make these insane to-do lists that I've never seen any kid do. It's like so nerdy. I would make calendars of when my basketball games were and when my projects were due so that I knew when my homework was going to be done. I was creating project plans when I was a preteen. I'm also a big music nerd, and And I've always organized my music. So back when CDs were a thing or cassette tapes were a thing, I would organize them by artist, by genre, by cover. I would redo it all the time. And I would always just kind of want to figure out a new kind of creative way to organize my things. So still, kind of the PM tendencies in me, but I didn't know it. I didn't even know what a PM was. Fast forward to college. So told you all I wanted to be a doctor. Before college, I told my parents, don't want to be a doctor. And they were like, well, you're already enrolled for pre-med, so give it a go. So my dad had this great idea for me to go on rounds with a general practitioner, which would never happen today because of HIPAA laws. So thinking back, I had a full day scheduled with the general practitioner, which was really kind of him to have me in his office going on visits with him. I made it through 2 visits. I was so grossed out. People are gross, and I wasn't gonna touch them. I was not gonna be touching someone. I was not gonna be encountering some disease. Wasn't my thing. I left after 2 hours before lunch. I had to go home and tell my parents, I'm not doing it. And that took guts, like that wasn't easy for me to do because I knew my parents wanted to push me in this direction, but it wasn't the right direction for me. So they said, go ahead, give it a go to college, try it. If anything, you'll get the credits. Nearly failed out my freshman year. Biology was terrible. Chemistry was terrible. I loved English. I liked math a little bit, and I did okay in those things. I ended up switching my major to English and fine arts, which was kind of weird, I think, for my guidance counselor at the time. And then when I think back again at my skills, I was good at art and writing. Socializing is always a skill every teenager has or early 20s. But I was also questioning everything at that point. I was really curious about, the subjects that I was studying and how they were going to affect me long term. I was thinking in ways that I think a lot of college students don't think, because I had faced that challenge of somebody wanting me to do one thing, but actually wanted to do something else. And that something else for me was editorial. So the first job I took out of college was with a startup company. It was an online sports instruction company. And I was an editor. I was writing content. I was also planning projects, but I didn't know it. I was creating wireframes, but I didn't know it. I was also learning HTML and Photoshop and everything that I would kind of know later on in my career. So then, age 31 to current. Current is 39, I will say. I'm not embarrassed to admit that. Digital PM, how did I get into it? So I worked for this startup, of course was laid off, as everyone who worked at a startup was, unless they became a millionaire. And essentially ended up in a job where I was managing projects, but I was an editor. So I was doing production schedules for print work. I was kind of the webmaster for a university, and then I was hired to an agency. And that was when I was actually told by a recruiter, this is what you're good at. She asked me a series of questions. I didn't understand what she was doing. I was kind of just in an interview process, wasn't really looking for a job. And she said, I want to hire you as a project manager because that's what you're going to be good at. And I was like, how's that different from an account director? And she had to explain it to me, and I still didn't get it. And I had the job, and it was tough. I was working for a company called Razorfish. It was very big. There were a lot of processes, spreadsheets, finances, monthly reporting, things that were really overwhelming to me. 3 years later, I took a job at a smaller company where I was able to excel at the things that I loved, which were planning and writing, but also learning. Happy Cog was a place where I was able to attend events, I was able to write, I was able to meet people like you, travel, and start things like the PM Summit. So I look back on my career and I kind of think, what were the qualities overall that kind of made me a project manager? Before I get to that, does anybody relate to this story? Does anybody feel like they kind of fell into it in a similar way? I see a couple of hands, okay. This isn't all gonna be about me, I promise. So what am I? I'm organized. Organization is part of my life. Compartmentalize things all the time. I'm curious, always wanting to learn. That was a big thing when I took my last job. I wanted to be in a company who would invest in me learning. I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, just like being here on stage right now. Awkward situations are typical for project managers, and I'm comfortable being in them and being a part of them. I'm helpful. I like to be a part of a team and know that someone can turn to me and ask me to do something big or small and be the person to help. I'm a communicator, which is huge. I think communications is huge in project management. It's something that makes me a good PM, is being a good communicator. I'm detail-oriented. There is not a list that is written that isn't checked twice, or a conversation that isn't had without notes taken. And I'm courageous. Again, I'm standing here on this stage. I would stand on this stage just like I would stand in a client meeting and list out the problems or risks with a project in a way that is friendly and helpful. Do you guys, do these qualities kind of resonate with you? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. That's a good thing. I want to reinforce this one. If you have those qualities, you're not an accident. Your job is not an accident. You're meant to do this work. And you're here because your teams need you. They need you to do this work. Because without you, they could be poor. They could be broke. The business could go under. They'd miss deadlines, make clients unhappy. The thing is, do they realize it? They have you there on the team, but do they realize how and why they need you? And that's kind of where I'm kind of embarking on this journey. So when I started to think about if our teams realize they need us, and now that this community really has some traction and we're moving, and we're doing things like Pathfinder and blogs, and people are doing new things every day and talking about process, it's really cool. But are we actually going back to our teams with the recognition of the work that is being done? So I went out and I asked a bunch of people, what do I do? Because I've often heard, what do you do? And when someone asks me what I do, I say, digital project manager. And then it's like 5 minutes later, I've finally described what I do. So I thought it would be fun to talk to people outside of the industry, in the industry, and then kind of give a little context for where we stand within the world of PM. So this is where we're going to start with our non-industry perceptions. So this is a friend of mine. She's an executive chef. She has nothing to do with digital. She barely can use her iPhone. So I said, Vanessa, what do we do? What do I do? What does a digital project manager do? She said, manages, coordinates, executes, and implements the development and sometimes maintenance of digital projects such as websites. So she knows me, so she knows a little bit about what I do, but she still got it wrong, right? People always think that we execute and implement things. They can't grasp the fact that we just manage the building of the thing, not the actual building of it. So that's one thing that she got wrong from an outside perspective. So I came through immigrations the other day in Manchester Airport, and I wrote digital project manager on my little card. Obviously, I added this slide like yesterday. And he said, so what kind of projects do you manage then? And I was like, whoa, okay. And I had to explain, when you're at immigration, you're like a little bit nervous. I was like, oh, websites and apps? And he was like, oh, cool. I was like, yeah, that is pretty cool. Thanks a lot. Thank you. And there's this jerk, right? It's always annoyed me that they had that show, The Apprentice. You guys know the show, The Apprentice? And they'd pick somebody at random to be the project manager who really didn't have any tools or skills or anything. They just made decisions, and if they made the wrong decisions, they got fired. So I always felt like that gave project management a bad name, aside from the fact of who this guy is, and if he ever is in office, I might be your neighbor. So yeah, there's that perception that's kind of out there that I think is just, it's wrong. And then there's my mom, who would absolutely kill me if she knew that this picture was on screen here. Yeah, and my dad with his very American shirt. If I'm embarrassed myself, I'm embarrassing them too. So my mom actually got it right, you help teams organize their work. It's a very short statement that is concise, and I can't believe she got it, because no matter how many times I tell my mom things, she doesn't get it. So this one I was actually most pleased with. But in general, I think people outside of the industry, their perceptions are they kind of get it. They know what project management is. They don't know what digital PM is. So they don't really get it. So we have a little work to do. Let's talk about industry perceptions. So I reached out to a bunch of people within the industry to ask them, what does a digital PM do? And some of them are long because, Digital PMs keep projects moving. This is Sarah Wachter-Betcher, sorry. She's a content strategist She wrote the book Content Everywhere. She's actually a neighbor of mine, and we're working on a project together too. So she said, digital PMs keep projects moving. They maintain a clear grasp of the big picture while noticing and addressing little issues before they turn into headaches. They're experts at articulating what's happening, who's responsible for it, and when it needs to get done. So no one, team, clients, stakeholders, leaves a conversation unsure what they're supposed to be doing. What do you guys think? She nailed it, right? She pretty much nailed it. I mean, she's a writer, so I would expect her to nail it. But I was really happy with this one. So I was like, cool. So Paul Boag, we all know Paul, right? He was here last year, and he loves to start off with a negative comment. As far as I can tell, project managers do nothing. Thanks, Paul. But if they stopped doing it, then I'm pretty sure everything would fall apart. In some ways, they're like the oxygen. What they do is invisible, and if you take it for granted, right up until the moment it isn't there anymore. So I think he stole a little bit from Nancy Lyons, if you were here last year. We are like the oxygen, and if we're not there, you can see everything that's not happening. So I appreciate that. I don't appreciate that he said we do nothing. So Whitney Hess, this one's really long. Whitney is a friend of mine. She's an empathy coach, and she co-hosts a podcast called Designing You. So she said, digital project managers are the stage managers of the internet. They keep productions running smoothly from the first rehearsal to the final bow. As the communications and organizational hub for all things creative and technical, they ensure that all disparate parts are working in unison, overseeing the cast and crew and pitching in when necessary. Without them, the director's vision would never become reality, and all of us would be out of work. So I made that last part red because it's a little extreme, right? Like, if you're not there, people aren't going to be out of work. Somebody will probably inherit the role of PM, and that's the way a lot of agencies work. It's a lot of way of organizations work. But I thought this was a pretty nice one, especially the part about being the communications and organizational hub for creative and technical. That's a lot. It's a lot on our shoulders. So Nancy Lyons. Nancy said a project manager captains the ship, pilots the aircraft, conducts the orchestra, mans the torpedoes, drives the bus. Alone they are nothing, but with the right process and team and resources, they are vital. They are everything. So alone we're nothing. I don't really appreciate that one because I don't think that's true, but that's a different talk. They're everything. Don't know if I agree with that either. I think we are vital to the work that our teams are doing. And part of this talk is to kind of boost you guys up to realize that you are vital, you're needed. So I do appreciate this quote. Last one. Jeffrey Zeldman's the founder of HappyCog. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him. He wrote a seminal book for our industry called Designing with Web Standards. He is also hilarious. The first quote that he sent me was highly inappropriate, and it could not even be used on a slide. I had to write him back and thank him and say, not comfortable using this one for me or for you, Jeffrey. So he came back with this one, which is a little less appropriate, a little more appropriate. So project management is like sweeping up after the elephants, only less glamorous. So my response was, you know what, you're right, I've swept a lot of your shit under the carpet over the past few years. And I didn't love doing it, but I did. And it isn't a glamorous job, is it? If you're in this for the credit, to be patted on the back and to have somebody say you do a great job, you're in the wrong job, right? So they get it. They get us, right? Would you guys agree that they get us? They understand what we do? But we can still do better. I think we have a little bit of work to do for those people to understand the value of a digital PM on their teams. So next, what's our place within the greater PM community? So by the greater PM community, I mean those people who are project managers not in digital. You guys familiar with PM chat? Anyone? So it's this Twitter conversation that happens over the hashtag PM chat every Friday. I think it's around 5 p.m. your time, so I wouldn't be surprised if some people are missing out. I've been taking part in it every once in a while if I have got a free hour in my Friday afternoon. And this one time they wanted to talk about digital PM, which I thought was cool. But the opening question was, is it really different? I was like, what? What do you mean, is it really different? Did anyone say it was really different? Do we need to be different? This is a community of people who are working on similar projects. In that case, we're a little bit different. So I had a bunch of responses, as I always do. Not sure when anyone said DPM's different. Maybe I'm missing something. We've built a strong community in our industry, though. You guys agree with that? I said DPM's only 4 years old. We have no standards across projects, but we're eager to learn and continue to grow the community. Last one has a typo because I was probably like, no matter how you slice it, DPM is not going anywhere. You can embrace it or reject it. We're happy either way. So this is me kind of like standing up on behalf of this little community within the sort of big world of PM and the bigger world of the digital industry, just trying to stand up for who we are and actually figure out who we are and where we fit in. So with these guys, I would say we're somehow related. I was talking to Sam earlier, and I was saying we're kind of cousins with the traditional PMs, right? Like, we share the same values, we do the same types of things. I think some of the talks here absolutely would apply to the larger project management world. We might just be a little bit different. I think our culture is probably different in the way that we work. I think maybe the scale of projects is different, but I also think eventually everyone could be a digital PM. It's where the world's going. So what I'm saying here is we don't get it. I think they don't get it, we don't get it. We're trying to figure out where we fit in, and I think we'll get there. The reason we don't get it is it's our fault, because we're just busy working. And today is going to be the start of how and when we figure it out. And I'm going to get to that soon, I promise. So after that, I was kind of like, I will find the answers. I'm going to figure this out. I have ideas of how we're different, but I'm not really sure. And I'm not going to stand here today and say I'm sure and what I'm going to present to you is final. That's not the idea. The idea is we're a community, and we can operate on a series of principles that will get us closer to a point where we can identify ourselves in unison. So before I got to sort of finding the answers, I wanted to look back in history because it felt like the right thing to do. Like, how did project management start and where do we fit in? Checked out this book, it was interesting. Kind of gives a perspective of how project management is kind of everywhere. If you look around, everything was a project. This building was a project at some point. There was a PM who probably manned the project and help it happen on time and under budget. Maybe, maybe not. There's also this really cool interactive sort of map of projects or project management timeline that I took screen grabs of here. So this is actually 4 scroll throughs, and it's on this website called projectsmart.co.uk. And essentially, it's a timeline of, it starts with the pyramids and how PM was involved with the pyramids, and then it goes to the advent of the Gantt chart, the introduction of PMI, and so on and so on. Prince 2, revisions to the PMBOK. It's really kind of interesting to see kind of where the industry or the profession, honestly, has gone from essentially the beginning of time up until 2012. So I'm reading this, reading through it, educating myself, actually pretty interested in the reasons a lot of these things happen. And then it occurred to me, this thing stops in 2012. What does that mean? That means us. This is where we come in, right? Digital project management's not represented in this timeline, and now is our time to actually make a mark. But how do we make our mark? What are we going to do to actually make it so that this group of people that's represented here and in other countries in the same space, same industry, are represented in that timeline? And my idea is that we need standards. I think a lot of the people in this room have the same title, the same role, but we're doing the job very differently from job to job, from place to place. And that's because we work with different people, clients, we're practicing our projects in different ways with different methodologies, just like Suze was talking about, and a number of factors. So how do we come up with standards? And that's what I'm going to present next. I've come up with 5 principles that I kind of want to just run by you guys to see what you think. Now, these aren't tactics. Like I said, I'm not going to give you ways to do things. These are more principles or kind of like a manifesto of things that we as a community are. And I'm not saying that these are necessarily different from traditional PM. They could be connected in some ways. But to me, these are the things that we as a community should embrace. So here's the first one. We are chaos junkies. Does anybody know what that could possibly mean? I don't see any hands, so I'll just explain. So we thrive on projects when there is a lot going on, because we feel useful when we can remove blockers from our team and we can clear the waves and clear the chaos. We thrive on problems because we know that we can solve them. Maybe they're not problems that we ourselves have answers to, but we know the right people to go to, and we know the right methods to take to actually get problems answered or cleared out of people's way. We break processes to make new ones. Sue's kind of just gave a talk about that, right? We use waterfall, we use agile, we use waggle, whatever you want to call it. We make processes that work for our budgets, our timelines, and our teams and clients. And that's important. We don't just follow templates, right? We don't just simply follow a book. We don't have the book. We don't have the PMBOK. We don't necessarily feel like we need it either. We ask questions, we talk to our team, we talk to our clients, and we seek solutions that feel right for our projects. And of course, we make our own templates when we need them. We've seen a bunch here today, and they're all great for the situations that the PMs that have been on the stage have been in. I've made my own. I made all of these templates because I needed them. I made a stakeholder decision matrix because I was working with a company who said that they were flat and they weren't sure how decisions were going to be made. So I had to figure out a way to sort out who the decision makers would be on the project. I came up with a set of questions for me and my PM team to start interviewing stakeholders aside from stakeholder interviews, or to be included in stakeholder interviews, so that we could make good project management decisions on projects. So check those out there on my site. And I would say, you can see it up there, it says, adapt them. I would never put a template in front of you and say, use this. Put it in front of your client. Use your mind. We manage with our minds, not the tools that we have. This community loves to talk about tools and who's using what tool and why. But I think we're never happy with the answers because no tool is right for everyone in this room. And that's because we use our minds to manage our projects. The tools help us with the details. They help us to stay honest about where things are with a budget or a timeline. But remember, a tool is secondary, you're first. Next one. We're multilingual communicators. So this was sort of touched on in the last talk in a different way. I'm not talking here about working on projects where there are multiple languages involved, though I'm sure being in Europe, you guys do deal with that quite often. I don't, typically. I have one time I worked with a client in Puerto Rico, and there were very interesting conversations, and the kickoff meeting was kind of crazy. It was like a UN scenario with translators and everything. It was kind of cool. Anyway, what I'm talking about is how we speak all of these things, right? Projects require marketing support, IT support, finance and contracts, legal and contracts. Then we have to speak design, UX, content strategy, code, front end and back end. Then add a layer of clients to that, right? And we've got to understand our clients and the way that they communicate and their goals for the project. And that adds complexity. And we're at the middle of projects and we have to sort it out. We also speak with expertise. Everyone in this room is an expert. As soon as you start a project with a client, have the confidence to know that they trust you and you're an expert. If they don't trust you, you're going to build that trust, and we'll get to that. We speak with empathy. We know that our clients aren't full-time on the projects that we're working on. We have the empathy to know that. We have to help them with their projects. We know that our teams are up against deadlines, and there are ways that we need to work with them to make sure they meet them. We also speak with consistency. I'm a big fan of creating routines on projects. By routines, I mean communication routines, things like status reports or status meetings, check-ins, one-on-one meetings. Then we work through these channels: email, phone, Slack, Basecamp, meetings. There are a lot of channels and a lot of different types of communications. And I would just say, make sure that you're creating routines that work for not just you, but for your team and your clients. Don't bombard them with different types of communications or one communication through all of the channels. Create routines that people expect. We also listen and take cues from our team and clients. The best thing you can do as a PM is sit in a meeting with your clients and listen and take notes. Pick up on details. Pick up on things that could be risks that are in your project that could come out later on. Next. Lovable hard asses. I'm a lovable hard ass, I know that. So people always say, oh, you're such a teddy bear. And I'm like, squeeze me really hard, see what happens. See, we have to create this balance, right, of being someone who is liked and likable, but also that person who is really focused on the issues on a project, like the timeline and the budget and the to-do list. So it's a really tough balance. I'd like to talk about respect for a minute, because I do feel like the people in this room probably don't necessarily get the respect that they deserve on a day-to-day basis, and that's because you have to earn it. If you do the work on your projects time and time again with clients to earn respect, you're gonna feel better about the work that you're doing. And it's not easy to do, but you want people to respect you and you want them to trust you. How do you build trust? So here's 4 components to that. Building trust, number 1, paramount, you have to be honest. We've talked this point to death. I'm not gonna talk about it anymore. Just be honest, please. Be reliable. Be the person who stays late with your team just because. It'll make them feel good. It's gonna build trust. Communicate and communicate and communicate again. I really think there's no such thing as over-communication. Some people might disagree with me, but I do think that communicating builds trust. It shows that you are actually a person who is invested in making sure everyone knows all of the details of a project all the time. The last one's really tough, because remember that Donald Trump example where he kind of put the PM in the fault position all the time? Sometimes you just have to be willing to admit fault. If it's your fault or not. Sometimes you could debate it, other times not. Just admit fault and move on. People are gonna trust you and respect you for it. And if you make a mistake, they're actually gonna respect you more for the recovery of your mistake more than the mistake itself. Be an active member of your team. Don't just sit behind your computer and check your timeline and check Slack and make sure like all the boxes are checked. Think about the strategic vision and path of the project. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Love this one. This is one of my favorite sayings. I am not your damn secretary. I schedule meetings. I take meeting notes. I do all of the things that maybe an administrative assistant would do on projects, but I don't manage your personal calendar. I'm not gonna schedule your one-on-one meeting with someone else. And I want you to know that I'm an active member of the team. I'm not your secretary. Next one. We're consummate learners and teachers. So in an industry like this, there's always some kind of new technology coming out. There's a new process or a new way of coding something or a new design principle that designers glom onto. We have to keep up with that stuff. How do we do it? We learn on the job. A lot of what I've learned in my career has been on the job, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm constantly using the people around me as resources so that I can build the knowledge that I have and the tactics that I use on other projects. We learn from one another. Here, this is a great example of it. Conferences, articles, blog posts, Twitter accounts. There is so much information out there right now for digital project managers, as opposed to 3 years ago even, that it can even be overwhelming. As someone who is right in the middle of it, it's tough for me to keep up. So I urge you to try to keep up and at least find the things that help you. This is an article that I wrote for Team Gantt. It's a part of a guide to PM that's got a bunch of links of places that I use to keep up, websites and blogs and things like that. So teaching, why do we teach? Again, we teach to build trust, right? If you can sit down with a client and actually talk them through the process, or estimates or why something is happening a certain way, they're going to trust you. They're going to understand why you're doing that process or why your team needs to take extra time to design a comp, whatever it might be. We teach people so we can gain predictability, and by that, I mean teaching someone about a process will have them understand what's going to be coming next in the process, and then you can understand what you're going to get back from them. If you think about kind of the stakeholder review process of a design on a project, educating your client simply on the number of iterations that you'll go through on design can go a really long way in building trust. Right? We like to teach people so that we can test new ideas. So I was on a project where we didn't have a huge budget. We wanted to deliver wireframes, but we wanted to deliver them in a really low fidelity way. We had a designer on the team who was really good at pencil sketches. They looked really great. They looked really nice. We knew it would be cutting corners, but we thought, if we teach the client about the intent of the deliverable instead of the way the deliverable looks, they might understand it, and we might be able to test this idea and save budget to do something bigger later on. And it worked. We also teach so we can build a common understanding. You want to teach your clients about your work and talk about how you work and how you're proud of your work as much as possible so that they understand what's happening on your side of the fence just as much as you understand what's happening on theirs. It also creates a win-win situation. If you can teach a client something that you're doing or your team is doing, and they fully understand it, they'll then go to the rest of their organization and educate those people on it, and they end up looking like rock stars, and that's what you want. Last one, we're pathfinders. And this is a big one for me, because I want you all to focus on the strategic path of a project, not just the milestones, the to-dos, the budget, and the timeline. Because those things are important, and you need to keep those in check throughout the course of the project, but that's the easy stuff, guys. Creating a project plan, tracking to-do lists, anyone can do that. So don't focus on that as much. I'm not saying drop it. I would never say drop it. But I would say focus on the strategic path and the success of your project. What's that mean? It means, do we have to take a different process to get to an endpoint on a project and actually be successful? Maybe. Does it mean that we have to extend the budget a little bit and have a conversation with a client about it? Maybe. Either way, what you're doing is you're being excited about what success looks like and the path that you take to get there. And maybe that path starts this way and ends up this way. That's okay. You have to be comfortable with changing that path along the course of the project. I'd also say you can achieve success with practical applications of deliverables, processes, tools, and expertise. The way I like to think of this is having your own DPM toolkit. You have all of these things. You know the deliverables that your team can create. You know the processes that you've used on your projects. You know the tools that are out there. And your team has the expertise to pull the right tools out of those categories to create a project that's going to work for you and going to be successful. Lastly, be confident. Like I said, you're the experts here, right? Be confident in the fact that you're the expert, and that if you don't have an answer, you'll get it. Be a leader. Don't be the PM that sits behind your desk and waits for things to happen. Be the person who gets out from behind the desk, is an active member of your team, and actually does something for the team. And lastly, make work fun. This should be fun. PM feels really serious, right, and stodgy. It doesn't have to be. If you're following these principles, work is going to be fun. So my question to you is, where will you take us? I've come up with these first 5 principles. I don't think they're set in stone. I think they're okay ideas. I think they could be better. But where will you take us? As a community of people, you're the ones who really put a face on digital project management. So my rally cry is for digital PMs of the world to unite. I had to get my Manchester slide in there. So what we're going to do is a very brief exercise because the work starts now. The work didn't start when I put this talk together. The work starts now. What I want you guys to do is there are sticky notes in the cup holders at the ends, and I have some with markers up here, and you have pens. What I'm going to ask you to do is just write a simple statement, just like we are chaos junkies. We are consummate learners and teachers. Write it on your sticky note, and then when you go out for happy hour or before you leave, in this corner over here, there are 2 mirrors in the corner. I want you to stick them on the wall. And I'm going to actually use this input to further these ideas and hopefully create a set of standards or principles that work for our community. Because I really don't feel like I can do it alone. I need everyone else's help. Does that make sense? Cool. So take a couple minutes to do that. And in the meantime, recognize that you are awesome. This is awesome. This event is awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Can I also mention this? So really quickly, Sam and I started Pathfinder. You should definitely see more activity in that coming soon. I also just signed a contract with Rosenfeld Media to write a book. So I would think that some of the contributions that you're making today could make their way somehow into that book. So please help. Thanks again.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions for Brett before we finish? Up there?
Do you think being a technician and then being a PM helps you, or can you just be natural? Yeah.
Depends on you as a person, I think. I think being a technician helps you understand code more, which in turn will help you to understand that part of the process a little bit better and the dependencies of design. But I don't think it's a necessity that somebody needs that experience to come into a PM role. Oh.
Where do you think is next?
What do I think is next? So I would love for these principles to turn into something that is a standard for our industry that makes its way slowly into job postings. Think of it kind of as a manifesto for who we expect or the behaviors that we expect from digital project managers. So I'm not saying that it's like some written Bible, but it's almost like a list of things that you look for in a good project manager. Is that fair? Yeah.
The way I sometimes see a project manager, I'm trying to divide the skill set into 3 areas. So knowledge of project management as a subject, knowledge of the client's kind of core activity or what you're trying to help them with, and then knowledge of the how, of the technical aspects of how you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Which one of these 3 do you think is the most important when you start now?
So it was, the middle one was client, the last one was how. What was the first one?
Well, yeah, the first one's general project management.
Yeah. I think the how is probably the most important, to the question up there about code. Having an understanding or base understanding of how those things work, I think goes a long way. I think, we as in digital industry, we're not so embedded in processes or methodologies. So I think that's a really great foundation to have. I would never say that anything that is done in traditional PM shouldn't be adopted by PMs or at least have a base understanding of it. PMs often ask me if I think it's worth for them to get their PMP certification, and I say, if you can afford it and you have the time to do it, absolutely, it's helpful. Anyone else? Cool, thank you. Thanks, Matt.